Hey, this is one of my living Gestalt videos. It's been a while since I made one, and there's been lots of things on my mind. I'm jumping in, and yeah, I thought I'd share some thoughts and reflections and experiences. I'm here in my home in Hobart, Tasmania, here for another week, and then heading off to the grandkids, and then to the US and Cuba, where I'm doing a presentation at a conference there. I'm pretty excited about that, and then to Colombia, and then to China. Traveling lifestyle, Gestalt. So one of the things I thought I'd talk about was recent experience, because I'm a kind of a networker in the sense that I really like connecting up with other people doing similar things, and I have a interest in a range of domains, from social justice to spirituality to the therapeutic world. So recently I had a difficult experience, actually. I reached out to someone that I didn't know who runs another training institute, because we're both working in China, and I thought it'd be good for our students and connect up and that type of thing. So the response that I got was very icy. I mean, I didn't know this fellow, but clearly he had some pre-ideas about me. It was a very, very cold, icy, sort of hostile response, and he couldn't get off the phone fast enough. It was about a 15-second conversation. And so it left me, I was a bit sort of jarred by the experience, but it also left me thinking about human beings and human nature and such. And I've been talking with a few colleagues about it, actually, because I like to make sense of what happens to me and be able to fit it in my own meaning frame, or find out where it sits outside my meaning frame. And for me, it sort of comes in the category of people who are senior in our field, who have been practicing therapy for 30 plus years like me, and done their own therapy, and work with people. I mean, I have some, I guess, expectation that the accumulation of that knowledge and experience adds up to some sensitivity or compassion or willingness to regard people in a broader light. And what I've noticed, particularly in the psychotherapy world, is that although therapists may be variously good at that within the therapy room, when they step outside the therapy room, then they don't always take that skill set with them. And I guess some professionals just see that they've kind of got a professional life and they've got a personal or collegial life, and that there's sort of two different worlds or something. My own values are that I believe that there should be, and here's the should, I'm a Gestaltist, I don't like shoulds, and I got a should. There should be an integration. Certainly I hold myself to that. That's an important value for me. And I realize that I do have that value for other people, that whether it's in the field of spirituality or therapy, I think without an integration between what I do professionally and who I am in my personal life, there's a kind of a split. And so I've thought a lot about this over time, because I mean, I also have that split. Despite having that value, I am able to be patient in a certain way in the therapeutic situation that I might not always be in my personal life, or when talking to some call center in India or something. I'm not always a very patient person. So yes, talking to the call center guy and not getting what I want, or talking to a client, I can have a very different tone of voice on. So that's two different me's, and so that's I want to pay attention to that, and like I give rein to a certain kind of free rein to a certain kind of aggression or something when I'm talking to the call center guy. Whereas obviously when I'm talking to the client, I'm very careful and sensitive, and if there's some aggression, I'm going to be very judicious about how I bring that in a way that's very articulated and owned and helpful to the person. So I have my own splits, which I pay attention to. When I see other people's splits, like this, in my judgment, this guy that spoke to, yeah, I react to that. I find it difficult to see the disjuncture between the sort of supposed aspirations and the behaviour. And of course, as one of my colleagues said, well, that's being human. And indeed, we're all a bit failed in terms of the splits between whatever our aspirations are and what we can manifest. And I guess the evolution, personal growth is in some sense bringing those things together. And over time, sometimes the aspirations change, the beliefs, the ideals morph and evolve. So this question of splits, which in a pejorative way could describe as hypocrisy, and there's certainly no shortage of people that we could describe as hypocrites, whether it be politicians or spiritual leaders. It's a difficult thing. I find it difficult to encounter that because I guess I have expectations of other people, particularly people in positions of power, about the way that they use that power, and when they don't use it in ways that I consider to be helpful, when they use it in ways that I see as harmful, then sure, I do have negative judgments about that. And of course, I think it is important to have those judgments to be able to discriminate in the social realm and the professional realm in terms of behaviours which are harmful or helpful. And then at the same time, living the authentic life, sure, I can choose that for myself and deal with my own splits and try to be as humble or open as I can if someone gives me that feedback. Can I hold other people to that same level of authenticity? Well, I think if someone is espousing values of authenticity, I can hold them to it. If someone's espousing values of spirituality, I can hold them to that. And yet there's often not so much room for dialogue around that. We've got a wind coming up. So, this is, I guess, the human dilemma. How do we deal with these kind of situations where people don't use their power in ways that I think is healthy? I often try to approach people in such situations and try to talk with them honestly, but there's not always a willingness or interest to get that kind of feedback. So if there's not, then what am I left with? I'm left with a kind of broken and fractured world, to be generalized, that reflects my own brokenness and fracturedness. And I guess the edifying conclusion is that I want to stay open and willing to take in feedback and interested. And part of the difficulty of being in a position of power is that people are less likely to give feedback, to say something critical. Although I guess in the West there tends to be more of that willingness. In Asian countries in which I teach, there tends to be less of that. So I have to be extra careful with how I use my power and position. And so for me the conclusion is staying open. And in terms of how do I sit with this hypocrisy on various levels that I see, well, it was useful when a colleague pointed out to me that I do have these shoulds, and about how other people should be. And even if the shoulds are correct shoulds, people should use their power wisely. That doesn't deal with the actuality of when people do what they do, and they do things that are harmful, or they do things that cut off relationship. So that's really a challenge for me, and I guess for others, is to be able to be with the what isness of that without just collapsing, without just accepting it, and yet being with it in some way that isn't just about putting my shoulds on other people or grinding away on my own judgment factory. Like I say, I think the judgments are useful and important, and at the same time, what do I do with those? So Fritz Perls famously, back in the 60s, had his little Gestalt prayer: I am I and you are you. I'm not in this world to live up to your expectations. You're not in this world to live up to mine. Well, there's been a lot of critique over the years in Gestalt of this, and sort of seeing the limitations of that. And yet I can also see that speaks to the heart of the struggles of what do I do with my expectations? And in a way, of course, I want to put my expectations on other people, and it's kind of difficult to pull back in a sense and go, well, those are my expectations, and yeah, I guess these people are not in this world to live up to my expectations. So there's also kind of a practice of some sort of humility or boundariness there. So that's my homily for today. Hope this is useful to you and stimulates your own thinking, and catch you again.